Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of Carolyn Talks. I am your host, film critic and journalist Carolyn Hines. This is the podcast slash YouTube channel where I talk to film creators about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by Jee Hoon Seo, or as he'd like to be called, Fred, to talk about his career as a film student, because right now he is technically in production, post-production, right? Mm-hmm. For his second short film, Jesa, which is a film about this young boy, Jin, who is discovering the difficulties that his mother has in her relationship and in her marriage, because Jesa is a Korean ancestral rite of passage that you do for those who have gone on. It's you do it yearly. It's an annual event, and usually, from my understanding, the brunt of the labor is left to the wife of the eldest son. So they prepare all of this food, which is always looks delicious to me because I love Sean. And they prepare all this food, and then it's about bringing the family together to pay homage to this person who's passed on. But this film, from reading about the premise and seeing some of the behind the scenes footage that you sent me, is about this young boy realizing that his everything isn't as perfect as it seems. You know, his mother's struggling, and then you realize what is the cost of doing something this important when it's stressing out another person, which is his mom. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to Fred about this film and to talk to him about his work as a film student, because you will actually be my first official interview that I'm doing with a film student. Normally I speak to film students, but I haven't actually formally interviewed one. So thank you so much for joining me, Fred. Yay.
Thank you, Karen. That was like the most wonderful introduction of not just me, but like the film, the project I'm working on. I think I appreciate how much you understand what I'm drawn into the story and what I'm trying to get across. And so honored to just be able to just have these casual conversations with you, but also be a film student and have this opportunity. So thank you for having me.
Yay. So tell me about this film. So Jace, as I mentioned, is about this ancestral, right? But I thought it was interesting that you make the protagonist a young 10-year-old boy, because to me, I kind of read it as you're trying to show how, especially in a society like Korea and everywhere is a very patriarchal society, and having a male subject, a male character, come to the realization of the imbalance of power, and the gender dynamics at home, but also of Korea as a whole. So tell me about creating this story and why you decided to make your protagonist a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's such a great question to ask. So to begin with, the inspiration, this story is heavily influenced by my personal upbringing, my personal life. I'm a writer who likes to write based on my personal experiences. So for me, oftentimes the subject or the protagonist is a Korean male at a certain age that I've been through. And when I was growing up, I would see this kind of tradition as a family reunion and a celebration. And I wasn't aware of what my mom was going through to make sacrifices, not just for labor, but what she was doing behind the scenes for the family, because I was too young. I was just too innocent to know. My family was kind of separated. I was in America, going to school, going to boarding school, going to prep school with my mom and my brother, and my dad and all our relatives were in Korea. So I would constantly travel back to see them. And when I would see my relatives and family, it was getting accustomed to my native culture, which is in Korea, this kind of patriarchy and honoring traditions and honoring the dead. But seeing that my mom was having to perform a role that was specific to Korean culture, which she was not really restrained by in America. In America, she was just a free adult, a free woman, a mom. And at the time when I was, growing up around between the ages of 10 or 12, I would go back and perform this ceremony, and everything was very cinematic. It was moody, the lighting, the ritual, there's incense that you can smell the food, and it's very solemn. You bow, and I could see this moment being a movie in my life, that I want to make one day. And later on, as I became an adult and an adolescent, 18 or 19, going off to NYU film school, that's when I fully understood what my mom had gone through, what kind of sacrifices she'd made. And we were finally able to talk as an adult instead of like a kid. And at the time I wanted to write like a feature screenplay version, and it was hard to, make it stick because it was my first time writing a script and, learning how to make films and be a screenwriter, be a filmmaker. And then flash forward like 5, 6 years, I went back to the Korean Army. I came back to New York. I'm in my senior year, about to graduate. And as a thesis film, this kind of felt like the only film I ever really want to make at this point. So I got to make a short about like 15 to 20 minutes, almost as like a proof of concept, but really just this was just the film that I felt I knew the best and I wanted to make the best. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and the thing is about as we were talking, so there's a film called Come Home Again by Wayne Wang. And it's kind of where it kind of focuses on Chuseok. And
Oh,
it's about this Korean American man, and his mom is, spoiler, dying.
yeah.
But like he comes to the same realization that you had growing up, and then also the character of Jin, where it's like because his mom is so sick, she can't prepare the Chuseok meal. So he's taking on the responsibility of that, of preparing this meal. And then he comes to the realization of how much work
Mhm.
his mom undertook every year preparing Chuseok and all of these meals. And then he realizes, oh, wait, I thought my mom loved this, and she did because she shared with
Oh,
him and everything. But then he realized, yeah, it's you love doing it, but it's also labor, and like, and it's about the whole, you can say, oh, the labor of love, but then you realize, no, sometimes you like the love doesn't translate to the labor, because you like the labor is just so oppressive, it's just so heavy. And like your film is like that. It's showing like, yes, this ancestor is about showing respect and love and honor to someone that you miss, and that you're paying attention to them, and you're showing that you haven't forgotten this person that's passed on. But for the
mm.
person who has a responsibility of preparing this right, they're not able to even invest into the emotional side of that, because the labor is so intense and it's so oppressive. They can't even miss the person that they're supposed to be honoring, because they're like, I gotta prepare all of this food for all these people. And as they're getting to talk about missing this person, like, even preparing the food isn't the end of it. They still have to make sure that everything is going according to plan afterwards. And it's like, but how are you really honoring someone when someone else is being
Yeah,
oppressed in the same way?
absolutely. No, that's a very good point. And I think when you asked about, how I decided to put it in the lens of a boy, it was so obvious to me because when I was growing up, I was seeing what was happening with my mom, and it almost seems like maybe like the word injustice is a little bit hard because, she's still performing the role that she has to or that she wants to, even though it's not favorable. But I would just be a kid and I'm watching this and I'm confused and I'm like a bystander. Like I'm not really solving the issue. We're trying to change it. And I was probably nervous and scared. I didn't really know what was right, what was wrong. And as like a male, I don't know, Korean writer, director, my only experience of that knowledge, that story was from the perspective of a little boy. Like it didn't make I don't really have the breadth of knowledge to write this story from the mom's point of view or from a woman or for a girl because I never went through that. I can only imagine so much. Whereas I have the advantage of at least knowing what it's like to see this from like a third person. And, one of the like most important scenes in the film is this boy is kind of, uh, you know, performing this ceremony at the end where he's offering seeds and fruits and snacks, like the food to the outside world, to nature, to give back. And he stumbles upon like this window, and there's curtains, and he's looking through into the kitchen where his mom and his older brother, who kind of knows the situation, is having a very like harsh fight. And his like that's his moment where things are like starting to shatter, or he's realizing. And I think that was just like the best way for me to tell this story, just through the lens of a kid who resembles me in one more ways than less.
Yeah, and I think that's important, because because and this is something I've been talking about a lot with people. Whereas as the world progresses, I feel like we're regressing. Whereas and in relation to the story is that yes, women's equality, yes, we want all of these things, but then it's like the way. Of course, I'm not Korean or anything, but it's kind of the same way in the Caribbean and in like a lot of households where for Christmas, the responsibility of preparing Christmas meal usually falls to the mom, and then to the daughters. And like I have a brother who's 10 years older than me and my twin sister. But usually, even when it came down to preparing Christmas meals, my brother would be outside. He and his friends had this tradition every morning at Christmas after we did the church service. They go into the Queen's Park, which is like the national park at Barbados, and play football for hours on end.
Yeah.
While we are at home in the kitchen making Christmas dinner. And we missed that. And I remember one year, I was like, "Why isn't Sean here?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And my mom was just like, "He's just not." And I'm like, "But hold on, why is this even accepted? Why is it all the boys in the neighborhood go and get to play cricket or football every Sunday morning while their moms and their aunts and their sisters are preparing the meal, And it's just like, but why does this automatically fall to us, And it's like the world has progressed, but I'm like, so many things haven't changed, and you're like, why can't the boys help prepare the meal? For Jesa, why can't the boys help prepare the Jesa ritual ceremony? Why can't they help prepare the food? And all of that.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, because I think like there is this, unquestioned following of traditions and history and customs and culture. And you get to like my growing up background is very different from my mom. Like she accepted these because they were the norm. And now I go to school in America and I'm accustomed to just like more of an egalitarian society or like democracy. And I'm thinking like, this is odd, but I guess we're going along with it because no one's really making a point or making an effort to change. And I'm like, that would like kind of concern me. Like, am I supposed to, take action to intervene? And even like to this day, when I go back home to Korea, like when I go to my grandparents' house, like who I love so much, and they love me so much that they like prepare all these amazing dishes and foods that they just spoil me. And when I go to the kitchen and try to clean up or do dishes, it's like, no, you don't do that. Like that's leave that to us. And my older brother, he's 5 years older. He has a fiance now, and they're getting married next year. And she's come over for meals at our grandparents, and she'll be doing dishes, and I'll go and try to help because that's kind of like what I do now. Like I cook, I do dishes at home. I sometimes do dishes like at my mom's house and my brother's house. And my grandmother will be like surprised and be like, "Oh my God, like look at our little grandson like help out with dishes." And it's just funny. But I think like with this film, back then I don't think I had a voice. I wasn't like aware of what to say or who I was. Whereas now I have a better sense of who I am now and what story I can tell, and I have a voice through this medium and this work. And it's not so much as aggressive, like let's not do this tradition anymore. It's more like, well, we love this tradition, we love my family, but something is off, and I just kind of want to present it in the most naturalistic way, so that maybe people can have their own assumptions and own conclusions. Like maybe things can change, maybe it doesn't have to be this way, but it doesn't have to be a harsh like attack on the tradition, the culture, because those are still very important for my grandparents and my dad, like who value this custom.
Yeah. It's not about getting rid of the custom and the tradition. Like these things are very important to staying close to our culture, especially as people of color. It's just like the way of doing the ceremonies can be done differently. Like the load can be shared equally between both like your mom or your dad or a brother and a sister, or a husband and a wife. It doesn't just have to be one person doing everything. Just share the burden, And I think and as you're talking, like, so there's something that as a person of color is something that I try to talk about a lot in my work as a film critic and a journalist, especially when I'm talking to creatives of color, where like like you mentioned, like being in like North America and in the US, and like as you said, like society is very egalitarian, but then also being also very aware that, you know, like as I was saying, like it's not perfect. You know, living in North America is not perfect. You know, like we still have so many struggles. There's still a lot of imbalance in regards to like gender equality and all this kind of stuff. But when it comes to like a lot of ethnic cultures, where I think for a lot of people, they think in order to become progressive, that means doing away with tradition, you know, doing away with the things that make our cultures unique.
Right.
And I think, and that's something I was trying to like talk to filmmakers about. And I'm like, but okay, you say you want to make, yes, the society progressive. And I'm like, don't do away with like the Jesa. Don't do away with all of these traditions. Just like even the load, you know, just like make it more progressive. You know, saying like a husband can help his wife prepare the ceremony, even for doing like making kimchi, like the annual kimchi making, like husband can help his wife make the kimchi. You know, it doesn't all have to be the mother and the sister and the mother-in-law and the grandmother. Like the men can get in on the do too, because that's also how you learn about your cultures. Because I think for like a lot of ethnic cultures, you have people within the cultures who don't even know certain aspects of it because they don't take part in the preparation of it.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah.
No, absolutely. I think like, you know, growing up, like you see that it's not perfect and you think about how can it be done better. And like this story is almost like just a chance to see or put into context and see the perspective of an event, of a custom after we've had some time to digest. Like this was happening to me back in like 2005. The film is still set in like present day, but it's like, how is this tradition that was honored in 2005? Can we adapt it or make some changes to the present day? Because you know, I still want to retain, like, I think history and traditions, they are like, it's what makes us like as people, as families or cultures. And I want to like honor certain aspects and retain that because they matter to me and they're fun. I take a lot of pride in it. I think just being Korean and how my grandparents raised me, and yeah, so I think it's a cool opportunity.
Yeah, it is. And like something literally just occurred to me as you were saying, like I think one of the reasons I'm fascinated with like Korean culture in particular is because there's so much of the culture is about acknowledging ancestors and where you came from. And as we were talking, the thought occurred to me like we don't have that in Barbados. Like we don't have something that in our communities. Yes, like when someone passes, like you have like your obituaries on. That's like we literally we keep the obituaries because that's how we remember like the person, you know. And like, but I don't have my grandmother's obituary, you know, because that's back home in Barbados with my mom, my sister, and I. We don't have anything here. The only thing I have of my grandmother physically, apart from me, my face looking like her, is a picture. But as you're talking, I literally said, "Wow, if we had something like Jee, I would probably remember more about my grandmother's passing. Like I don't even remember how long ago it was. It's probably like I've been here 15 years, so probably 20 years. But I'm not exactly sure because I don't have something to mark the time. You know, whereas like for that ceremony, you are able to mark the time that the person passed, and you can remember exactly.
Yeah, it holds a space and a day for where you actually get to remember them. Like I think about the movie like Coco and like Dia de los Muertos in Mexico, and it's such a like beautiful tradition and celebration, and such an like, the more I think about it, like my grandparents on my mom's side have passed away, but we don't perform the ceremony for them because like that side of the family was not as conservative or not as traditionalist. And you just kind of forget that they were part of your life, that they exist, like their tombs, that we go every so often. But like I think about like my grandparents on my dad's side, like we honor this every year, like every time I go back to Korea. And I know that when they pass away, that like I'll still want to do this and remember them and hold them in my like conscious like world, because they are such a big presence in like my life and my family.
Yeah, for me it's kind of the opposite. Like for my grandmother, my mom's mom, she's the one that passed, and she was the one that my sister and I grew up with, you know, like she's the one that really instilled a lot of things for me. I think one of the reasons I love film and TV so much is because of her. Because then every time we spend time with her, she sit down in front. we sit down in front of the TV and watch the news and like Days of Our Lives and like and like the soap operas. And so I think a lot of old like Hollywood films we would watch with her. So I think that's one of the reasons I love film. But it always bothers me that I would have to call my mom and ask what day did grandma pass because I can't remember it. Whereas like for my dad's mom, my sister and I, we met her when we were 8 years old. She already had Alzheimer's. So we didn't really have time to get to know her.
Right.
And when she passed, we was like, okay, she's passed. It's like, okay, dad's mom has gone. But like it didn't have any like emotional impact on us. So like that side, like we don't really have I don't have an emotional connection to that part. But again, like if we add some, like my dad doesn't really talk about her that way because my dad is old too. He's 90. but yeah, he is old. but we don't have anything to really mark that passing. And for me, that's like very sad where the people that came before, like the people without literally we would not exist, I don't have anything to really mark their passing. And like for me, that's very sad. So, but like for Korean culture, you have that. And like I think is that, as you said, like the purpose of the film is about showing how things could change. But I think it's also beautiful, like for you, like this is I kind of see as a way to honor your history, you know, and to honor your grandparents and to be able to take this film and show to your family and say, here, this is how we can change things. But then it's also saying, it's also you showing them, here, I'm actually making a film about our family, you know. I'm actually making a film about our connection to the people that we love. And like it's a story, it has a message, but I think it's also just like beautiful that you have this thing to show to your family and say, this is how much our family means to me.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's like such a wonderful thing to say. And I think like family is very subjective. Like when I was growing up doing the ceremony, like I didn't understand what the importance was. I was just like, I arrange fruit here and we just eat. And my grandparents would be like, this is your great grandfather. Like you are the descendant of like 26, you know, bloodlines and families. And, you know, it's almost like it only sounds important because he's telling me it is. It's not that I feel it's important. I know it's important. Like I still don't know who my great grandfather is or was. Like, yeah, like he grew up with this background and whatever. Like my grandfather, now I like gotten to know who he was when he was younger, and I've created this bond with him. And I'm like, oh, I really admire him. I love him, and I like want to remember him. But you know, these days in Korea, like as I think like our generation gets more modern, there's less and less time that families are spending together. Like back in the old days, like it was like three generational families, like the kids, the parents, and then the grandparents, like always like not necessarily living together, but always like having a shared experience. Was now like less and less. Like a lot of families will see their grandparents like on a special occasion, and there's not really a bond. And when they pass away, it's just like, yeah, our grandparents, you know, like they're our grandparents, but it might not have been. Like it's very subjective. Like I have a different relationship with my grandparents on my dad's side to the grandparents on my mom's side that like I didn't see that often. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's the same, but the thing that you just mentioned something, and it's something that I've been noticing being reflected in film, whereas Korea is becoming more modernized, like people are kind of like distancing themselves from like specific aspects of the culture, like with regards to like relationships to grandparents or great grandparents. I'm actually noticing that in film and in dramas, like where you're seeing less stories where you have characters being having scenes with grandparents, and like it's more focused on like the younger generation and their story. But you're like, okay, where's the grandparent in your story? You know, where's the mom? And I'll legit watch films and I'll watch dramas. I'm like, where's your mother?
Yeah, no,
you know, where's your grandparent? And like, there's no inference to that. And I'm like, and I'm wondering I'm thinking if a lot of that has to do with these changes in Korean society. And like as things grow on, like we know like the birth rate in Korea is like plummeting. And I saw a report just a couple of days ago where they're like 80% of Korean people between the ages of 25 and 40, I think, are single.
Right. Wow.
And I was like, wow. And I'm like, how is that going to affect the film industry? Because what are the stories going to look like in like 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, I think especially in New York, where I go to film school, I'm with a lot of young artists who have left home for like the first time to be in college, or who have different backgrounds and interesting experiences that are more individual, that are
Yeah.
more, like on like down on the ground of like living in New York as a 19-year-old, as a 20-year-old. And at this point in our lives, like this is what's in front of us. That's what inspires us. And a lot of times like family, grandparents, like it's not, we're not surrounded by them anymore. They're back home, or they're, depends how close you are with them. So I think the stories tend to be more internal, at least in NYU, where there's more like independent filmmaking
Yeah.
and personal stories. It's really what's in your heart and like what makes you you. And for me, it just happened to be like that family played a big role in this story and my background. But I think it's just different. It depends on like the artist and the person.
But you see, the thing you're saying that, but your actual film 2030s actually reflects the other aspect of it, where it's just this very internal story, which I think is interesting. You have one story that is about the family and
Oh
extended family.
yeah,
You have
that's
another story
true.
that's very insular, and
That's
it's just
true.
about this guy and his girlfriend and this other person that he's interested in. And
Yeah.
like it's a very contained, it's a very self-contained story, it's literally three characters, but then it's like it is basically we're talking about the life of a student in NYU, where it's just like
Right.
this is my world, this is my reality right now, school, and the relationships that I'm really
Yeah.
involved in.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think like that story is about like career, like and college and dating, and like there was no room for like family in that short film. Like if there was a feature, like obviously I could have incorporated like the parents and like other friends, and but in that story just it didn't really need more characters. And I like being able to contain it to three characters. That when I made this film, it had eight characters. I was like, how am I gonna direct eight actors? How am I gonna get every character involved? But then rewriting and rewriting and getting to learn, like meet the talent and seeing new opportunities to have them all be a part of the story was so exciting for me, because there's like eight characters: the mom, dad, son, brother, and then like the relatives, the uncle, aunt, and then the grandmother, grandfather. And even if they didn't have speaking lines in certain scenes, their presence in the room, the scene, would make such a big difference and influence in my eyes. And the actors really appreciated that and took that to perform their roles. And it just elevated the story, because it felt like, okay, this is a story about family. This is about eight relatives that are like indeed a family, but also not a perfect family. And we had a wonderful cast and a wonderful like chemistry in the room in between takes.
And so that's where I wanted you to talk about casting. So tell me about casting from going from a film that has just three characters to one that has eight, and the challenges of that. And like, I guess you could say, I always like to ask about the pros and cons. So tell me about the challenges of going from three to an eight cast, and like going through the casting process and
Yeah.
finding people to pick to embody these characters that you imagine, because as you mentioned, some of them don't have like any amount of significant lines or whatever, and like their presence still has to tell a story. So talk about the casting process, and like where you were just like, we're like, oh my god, how am I gonna do this, because like there's
Yeah.
always that moment you were just like, but I think we would have to do anything significant, you're like, how do I do this, like sitting down and like writing is so hard. Like for me, when I have to write a piece, I'm always like looking at the computer screen, I'm like, what will my first word be? So like the casting process is like that. So talk about that.
I can tell you very easily that there's one pro and a million other cons. And the one pro is it makes a better story and a better film when you have great actors that can play these eight roles for this film. The cons are just endless. When I pitched this idea, when I first started this draft, the feedback I got was, you're gonna have to make this film in Korea. There's no way to cast eight Korean actors that are gonna be good actors in New York for a student film. So then it was about like, all right, I don't want to do that. I want to make this film in New York, in my like home base of NYU, during my school, like my academic year, when I have resources, when I have the guidance, when I have a schedule. So then it became, how are we going to make this achievable? And one was paying the actors. Like I went from working with student actors who were working for free to working with adult actors who are older than me, who have experience, and assembling this cast. Because out of the 8 roles, I had one person locked in, which is my roommate who played, who's always acted for my films because he's Korean. He and I just have a great relationship, understanding of like performance. He's an acting major at NYU. He just graduated. His name is Sung Chol Choi.
He's the one who played Jaehyun in 2030s, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And the rest of the 7 cast, there was a kid, the mom. Anyways, my first short film, it premiered at a small film festival in LA called Michaud over the summer, this past summer in LA. And we really had a hard time submitting our film to film festival or getting accepted, even though we felt the story was strong. And I felt that, those shortcomings, I needed to strategize and think in a more like commercial business manner, because like I am a film student and an artist, but I'm trying to learn how the industry works and how I can like present my brand or filmmaking and get those opportunities. So the next step was to bring in like a recognizable talent or a star. And I was interning at Bound Entertainment. It's a Korean American production company in LA this summer. And I watched this one film called B-Side for Taylor, which was like a Korean story. And one of the characters was a Korean mom played by an actress named Esther Moon. And she played supporting roles in Minari and Partner Track. But in this film, she really played a Korean mom that was so authentic, and like that would be the dream casting. I would want someone exactly like her, of her like caliber and status. And we built this pitch deck around her. And I was talking to other filmmakers who'd worked with other talent, at this early age, as a student. And they're like, yeah, you should just reach out to her manager or agent, just cold email and pray for the best. And we reached out to her, and she saw that her agent got back to me, and she said, yeah, she said she saw the pitch deck and she's interested. Can you send the script over? And I was like, okay. And we sent the materials. I had a casting coordinator at school, but we needed a bigger presence or some help. So I reached out to a casting director in New York. He also works in LA. His name is Wayne Chang. And I met at an Asian American International Film Festival where I volunteer. And he was able to help us bring in Asian American actors because he has a bigger pool and bigger influence. And we were able to fill in the rest of the roles thanks to him. And his concern was that there's not many Korean male actors in New York who speak Korean fluently, which was something I required for this specific story. I really wanted that fluency in language. And luckily we had a few candidates, but for like the grandparents, we couldn't find Korean actors. So he asked if I was willing to change the script to fit Asian American actors who didn't have to speak Korean. And we ended up finding 2 wonderful Japanese American actors, Tadashi and Mariko, who played the grandparents. And Mariko, who played the grandmother, said, I'm willing to learn the Korean lines if you give me a chance. And I was so thankful for that. So we had her learn Korean lines. And for the grandfather, who was a really important presence and character in the story, said, don't give me any Korean lines. I don't want to botch the accent. I want to keep the story authentic for you. And he was happy to perform these gestures and movements and actions with no lines, even though he's been on bigger productions and bigger sets and shows. And that kind of humility and enthusiasm was just, it just permeated throughout the set and the cast and the crew, and everyone had a great time on set. And then the performances just really took off. And that's what you want as a director in the room, is having the simple things set so that the actors can perform and be free to like really just exercise their craft.
Can I ask how much of the dialogue is in Korean?
I would say almost 80%. The English is mainly used between the son, who's kind of a Korean American boy who's grown up here, and our actor Romo Lee. He's like the first child actor I've worked with, but absolutely brilliant, like understood the character to a T, understood the performances. And he's not Korean, he's Chinese Filipino, but he looked Korean and he understood like everything that was going on in the room. Like we would recite Korean lines and he's like, wait, what does that mean again? And we're like, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot that you don't speak Korean, because he was acting so perfectly.
Mm.
And there's a little bit of English that goes back and forth between the mom and the brother, because they're also based in America. And I really had fun allowing the actors to kind of improvise and do ad libs, because that's kind of what I wanted in this family, that you're chatting, like there's a lot of conversations that happen in the background, in the foreground, that doesn't have to be so scripted.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, like in you're talking about the challenges of finding older actors that could do Korean and having to basically go for Japanese American actors. So I wanted to ask you, did you even consider perhaps going for non-actors? Like, like going for the Halmunim and the Helapaji and saying, you know what, let's just go for like fully authentic like Korean experience, and just going for like a grandma and a grandpa that would have been up for it.
I think that was definitely an option that was brought up early on, and it's not something I've worked with. It's not something I'm looking to do right now. Um, Mainly because if I knew people, if I was in Korea and I asked my relatives, hey, would you be willing to act? Would you be willing? If I knew the people, I would feel more inclined. But if it was a stranger, if I just had to cast someone in Koreatown, like, hey, do you want to be part of this movie? You're just going in there with so little like vetting. It's like, can they act? Are they a hospital person that you want to work with and be friendly with? Because on productions, like you don't want the actors to be like, okay, like wait, like did we cut? Like not know when to go in for a take and not know like the acting crafts, unless it is so natural to them, that story, that character. Because for me, like student sets, like everything's running on time, you're always short on time, and I need everything to be functioning at like full capacity. And these actors understood the assignment, were willing to work with the adjustments I needed with my crew, and we were working so efficiently that every day we had designed about 11-hour days, so no overtime. And we ended up wrapping early, like 30, 40 minutes each day, which was just not the norm for like student productions. And our older actors were so appreciative and were saying like, this has been the most smoothest productions I've ever been on. And like, thank you for having us and having the opportunity for us to let us perform with these characters. So like in all considerations, just like, I think there is an advantage of working with actors who are trained, who are professional. Like even paying the actors, you get a higher standard of skill and just more willingness. Like older actors, I heard, can be difficult to work with in times, like like if they have to go up these stairs at the house to get to the green room, if the meals aren't but our grandparent actors, like they've had no complaints. They were just so warm and friendly to work with. So I think I was just lucky to find this specific cast and crew.
Now you talked about about paying and like how that it helps with the quality. So talk about the finances now of a student film, because like making a short film, a regular short film is expensive. There's so much work that goes into it, so much red tape and so much administrative work that goes into it, because like a lot of people, I think a lot of people have the misconception that short films are cheap. They're not. Short films are very, very expensive, and because you got to do things like licensing, you got to do taxes, you got to get make sure you have like the correct contracts, to
Right.
film and all of these things, and workman's comp, because you got to do insurance for potential
Yeah.
injuries or anything like that. So talk about the logistics of creating a short film, and like the financial side of that and the administrative side of that.
Yeah. So one thing about like film school, I think undergraduate film school, it's like it's almost a zoo, because it's like you get there when you're 18 and 19. You're like, I want to make movies, and you have fun, and you don't worry about money. You don't know what goes into making a production, of feeding and housing and getting a group of 30 people to work together for one unified goal. And last year I made a short film. It was my intermediate film, my junior year, and that was like a 15-minute film, almost as big as like a thesis, but like a production budget for student films at that level, I would say is like a ballpark around like zero, like no money at all, to about like $3,000 for like a 2 to 3 day shoot. And our budget ended up being a little bit higher because of the locations we wanted to use. We wanted to kind of have good food and services for people, like working conditions. And so it came out to 8K. And yeah, for this film, my senior year, I thought, okay, maybe I'll spend a little bit more if I have to like increase the budget between like 12 to 15K. But once we started to decide like we're gonna pay the actors, we gotta get these locations, it ended up pushing to about $30,000, 30K. And I think when you get to this level of like, all right, do you want to just be a student filmmaker, or do you want to do this for a living? Do you want to do this for a career? That's when you have to just learn how to be a producer, and work with producers. Like my producers were phenomenal. Like I had a creative producer. Her name's Anna. She helped me with like the pitch deck and the script. I had a producer named Kaylin Lee Chu. She was from Taiwan, and she handled all the production logistics, the budgeting, and we had to find a way to make this budget like $30,000, which is not a small amount. But if we were making this film outside of school, it would have been, I think this was about like, I think we saved around like 75% because we were using the school's materials. We were not paying students. So this would have been like 4 times as more expensive. We were doing this in the outside world, outside of school, but we still had to make the money. And my family, luckily, is very supportive. Like my grandparents are funding my education, and they would be happy to support this film like they did last year. But I still want to kind of make it a challenge for us to fundraise, because that's what we have to do at the end of the day anyway. It's good practice. So my family, my grandparents, were willing to finance half the budget. So I earned 15K upfront to go into production. And then the rest we had to fundraise. And one way was crowdfunding, like our Indiegogo campaign. It's still going on. We're around about $6,000. So then it's like, how are we going to make the rest of the 9K? My roommate, the actor, he was working with the soju brand Lotte and their new product Sero soju in Koreatown, promoting it as like this new zero sugar drink, that alcohol that young people like to drink. And we pitched to them and be like, can we include a product placement? And they financed $3,000. So that's another chunk of money. Then we applied.
I can afford more than that.
Yeah. Then we apply to the school grant and we get another 1,000 or so. And we're just like putting these pieces together. And all of a sudden we've come up with most of the budget. And we're like, wow, this was a successful production. Like we saved money in some places, but we also raised money. And now we're about to like break even or have like extra funds left over for marketing and festivals. So it has been a very successful undertaking, but it was very difficult and stressful at the time. Like, so I wish I could just write and direct, but I think, when you're in film school, when you're a writer, director in independent filmmaking, it is your job to produce as well. So yeah.
Yeah, like there's this thing where people, on social media say, oh, like, just pick up a phone and make a film. It's a bit more difficult than that. Because even like pick up a phone, like you still got to do editing, you still got to do post-production. You can't just go into any place and film and say, I'm making a film. No, you need licensing, you need like all these things. And like for student filmmakers, I think for a lot of people that everyone's, I want to be a filmmaker. But then it's just like there's a lot that goes into filmmaking more than just directing the film. And even directing the film isn't just telling people where to stand. Like you have to envision this entire world. For me, I look at filmmaking as building an entire world from nothing. Like you have game developers, they build an entire game from like code, from nothing. And filmmakers is the same way. Like you got to build this, you got to build this universe. It's not just picking up a camera and shooting. You have to envision the world that you're shooting. You have to envision the story. But in order to make the story, you need help to execute it. Like, okay, you have a phone. Okay, so how are you going to distribute this film? How are you going to get people to see it? Distribution is another aspect that you got to figure out. what, like who's gonna help you show it around, like taking it to people, like for film festivals. Submitting to film festivals is a lot of work. Like we were talking before we began recording, but film festivals, pitching to film festivals is a lot of work, and there's a lot of unsurety because you don't know if you're gonna get accepted, but then you have to make sure you pitch to the correct platform. Like TIFF has like I think over a dozen different categories. So, and then like a lot of film festivals, there's different categories to submit your projects to. So you got to make sure that you submit to the right person and you have the correct right contact. So filmmaking is very complex. It's a whole beast and machine
Yeah.
in itself.
It's funny because like you talk about like, oh, you want to direct, you want to make films, but that only lasts like for me it was 4 days, 4 days of production. That's what we like. There's so much work that goes into filmmaking so you can do what you love, which is filmmaking. And that requires like for us, it was like 6 months of preparation. And then after the film's done, it's 6 more months of post-production and distribution and like networking and getting our film out there so that there is like a reason that we're doing all this. It's that it's being shown, people want to see it, it's being consumed as a content, as art, and then it gives me the next opportunity to do it all over again. So yeah.
Yeah, but you also got to make sure that this is really what you really have to be dedicated to it, because it is like the dream is to be a creative, but you also got to be an administrator.
Yeah.
You got to be a CEO, right? It's like
yeah, that's really what it feels like when I'm like working with 30 students and I'm like, all right, I need my head of departments to do this. Like it's a task force. And luckily I went to the Korean Army, so it's given me skills to be a leader and work with a unit and work as a team with my collaborators. But it's a funny like career. Like if in the span of a year, I'll go from like writing by myself, being so scared and like filled with doubts and worried, and then I'll start to bring on people, and then those people will like be the most fulfilling like relationships because you're working with them and you're bonding with them, and then you have this amazing production on set, and it's like, all right, bye, like I hope I see you again. You go back into this like part about being alone again. Like, all right, now I have to like do the legwork and work with people to finish the film, to get it shown, and then I have to write again. And then maybe next year I get to work with all these amazing people again. And it's like it's an odd cycle. It's very different from like a 9 to 5 job or one that has bigger job security, but you're constantly shifting roles. But that's just part of the process, and I think I enjoy it, and I'm willing to undergo those changes to continue doing filmmaking.
So I want to ask you now about making feature films. So like for everyone that says they want to be a filmmaker, everyone the goal is to make feature films, because to make feature films and to have a big budget film like with a big production studio and like in the main cinema markets and stuff, like that's the goal of success. But I want to ask you about short films, because there's when I was in Korea, I spoke to Song Dae Chan. This is the person I mentioned to you before, who is a producer in Korea. He has a studio, Take Production Studios, and he produces feature films, but he also produces dramas. But he's also trained to get in. He's also trained to help with production for short films, because the film The Guest that premiered at BIFF started as a short film, and that one showed at Cannes. And like we were talking about how for a lot of filmmakers, the goal is to have this big massive career, and like that's the mark of a successful filmmaker. And I was also talking about it with Kim Ho Won as well, and we were talking about how why is it that making feature films is considered to be the mark of success, whereas like why is it that short films are seen as less than feature films? Where I love short films, because I love the fact that filmmakers can tell such concise stories, such complete stories in such a short span of time. And it has nothing to do with a short attention span or anything. It's just like the challenge, saying, let me take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or even maybe 30 minutes and tell like a whole complete story in this short space of time. And I love that. I love it because it's just like, to me, it shows up, I think almost, this is just me personally. I think to me it's harder to make a short film than it is to make a feature film, because for a feature film, you have more time.
Mm.
You know, you can have more time to fill in the story and build the story. Whereas for short film, you're like, as we are talking, like you gotta have this entire idea of what just like means to Korean people, like this whole revelation for this young boy happening in such a short span of time, you know, for a moment that could take years for people, like maybe have a revelation about our families or about our culture, you're putting that into one short film. And I think it's, to me, I love that filmmakers take on that challenge, you know, and I love when filmmakers start their career as short film filmmakers and then go on to feature films instead of just jumping straight into feature films. So I want to ask you about your for you, do you see that if you keep making short films, are you gonna be like, you know what, I'm gonna make feature films only now, like, and and I'm not asking that to be antagonistic, I'm just genuinely curious because like you're now beginning your career, you know, like you're now really learning about the industry and not making the films, but how film festivals work and how like distribution and all of that works now.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. And I think there's, two sides to this answer. One is like the commercial success and also just like the personal undertaking. So for me, like, writing, like making short films is all I've learned to do, or all I've known and felt comfortable and felt capable of doing, because that's been my education and training at film school. And it is a very like disciplined craft because you're working with a very fine margins and you have to make sure everything that goes in here is necessary. And it's very, again, like discipline to storytelling and filmmaking, that like you're respecting the audience's time and experience. And I think, sure, it's challenging, but at this point it's what I can do compared to, like, I can't make a perfect feature film right now, but the end goal is to go there because I think we want our work to be seen. And a short film is only going to get so many views, and it's the big stages that, like, I think as an artist, or me, like, who loves playing competitive sports, as a competitor, like, you want to go to the bigger stages and bigger platforms and scenes where you're able to test yourself. And I think of like short films as, there are different kinds of competitions. Like, I like soccer, and soccer has different leagues and
Hear you. Soccer is football.
football.
Sorry.
I love European football, and you have the leagues in England, Germany, France, and they're all different calibers and tiers. But then you have like, local cups and tournaments. But then there's like the European cup, and like every stage the stakes get higher because there's more people invested. Like, if I were to make a feature film, like, I don't know, with like A24 and independent, like that is where every independent filmmaker wants to go. Or you make a film with like, NBC or Universal or Warner Bros, and like that's a bigger like blockbuster tentpole commercial film, and that for some people is a big measure of success. And I think I want to get to those stages and direct feature films because I want my work to be seen. I want to become a better filmmaker. And I think in terms of right now, my comfort level, my comfort zone is short films, because I feel like I've done it once. I did it this year and I felt like I learned and I knew how to execute it better. The next step is obviously to go to a feature film, just make my first feature film, because I have peers that are kind of in that trajectory now. And that's how you grow. You grow as a filmmaker. My first feature film will not be perfect, but I'll learn a lot. And it just gives me that confidence experience to be like, okay, I know I can do this again. Because with a short film, you're handling with a number of fine scenes. In a feature film, you're just doing more scenes. And if you know how to do each scene well in a short film, you just have to do it again in a bigger scene, in a bigger production, bigger days. But it's the same thing, all with the purpose to do one story, and all those scenes need to be in that story. So it's like the same job, but just at a bigger level, a bigger challenge. But I think that's where I want to go next. And I feel like I'm ready to just take on that challenge, whether I feel ready or like whether I am or not. It's just like just going into that gauntlet of doing the next thing.
Yeah, but you see, the thing for me is I just wish that studios would promote short films better or more. Because like for like you mentioned A24, I'm always like, but why can't these production studios have short film or what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word? It's not arms, but but like a devoted part of their productions to help elevate short films. Like
Right.
imagine if A24 was to help like filmmakers who specialize in making short films and say, we're going to give these films just as much visibility as a
Yeah.
feature length film. You know, like I wish, like for instance, Disney had our I got my issues with Disney, but let's use them. But you know, like Disney or Warner Brothers, as you said, like they had a division. That's the word, a division dedicated for
I
short
see.
films. You know, and like because for me, I think one of the other reasons is if short films were elevated more within the industry itself, that would I think give a lot of help with to me the sense of elitism,
Mhm.
whatever you know the word in the industry because that it puts I think it puts a lot of pressure on filmmakers, you know, especially younger filmmakers to think I can't make it. I'm not really successful unless I make it here. But then it's like you could be successful here too if they just brought up like for instance short films to the same level as feature films. You know, I wish there were like more studios had divisions specifically for that because if which is and it's funny to me because all the major film festivals have short film divisions, you know, have short film platforms. But again, and this is something that me as a film critic and a journalist, I always for my work, I always try to like give visibility to filmmakers who make short films because I'm always like people always a lot of critics and journalists want to focus on the feature films. I'm like, you got all these short films here too, you know, and some of them like I like a lot of short films have like impressive VFX. Like I've seen some short films from independent student filmmakers that have like better VFX and I've seen a lot of big budget films, you know. I'm like, they're doing the thing, you know. And for me, I didn't and like I asked you because I just want your perspective as a student, because I think for in the industry in particular, the competitiveness to be um successful with regards to films is putting a lot of pressure on filmmakers, you know, and not just on filmmakers but also on actors, you know, because actors they're thinking, oh, I'm not really successful if unless I'm in a feature film, you know. But again, I see some impressive performances in short films, you know, and like your films, like for I haven't seen like the new one yet, but for 2030, I think the cast did like I think they did a terrific job, you know, especially the two main leads that played Jae Young and his girlfriend. Like they're like they I got everything that I needed to get from those characters, you know, like Jae Young, I'm like trifling. And like I got all of that from their performances and like for their actors who played the girlfriend, like her scenes, like she went through her whole emotional journey in the scenes that she had. And I'm like, she went from being extremely happy to being completely disappointed and brokenhearted in like such a short span of time. And I always try to say, like, for performers, like your performance in this short film is just as important as a performance that you could give in a feature length film, you know, because like you're doing your job, you're conveying a story, you know, you're speaking to the audience. And like for me, I'm like, I'm receiving the message that you're sending out with your performance.
Yeah, I think, you know, again, there's two sides where one is the visibility and just like monetization. Cause like I'm learning that at the end of the day, this like the arts and film is it's still a business for people
Right.
and people who aren't the artists, you know, have to have a reason to invest and make money and have a return of profits. And, you know, short films is just less visibility. Like there's not really a market for it. I think another thing is that like we grow up watching films and like I idolize certain films and directors like my, you know, role model for a filmmaker is like Christopher Nolan, you know, who makes these amazing feature films like blockbusters, but also artistic like masterpieces like The Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar. And that's where we want to get to. And in order to get to that, I just feel like I have to prove myself that like, hey, I'm making a short film, but I understand the business like you know, requirements for this project and my future project and my brand and how I can sell myself and sell my work to I don't know, a studio or a production company to let me do what I want, which is make a great film. And I don't know. I think it's a natural process because like the arts and the business, they might be in contention, but they're ultimately in the same goal of making a great, successful film. And those restraints and challenges will make the artist and the work like persevere to overcome those obstacles. And a lot of times it creates a better story, creates a better production, even though like you're like, oh man, we don't have enough money. Like you just got to create, like you got to problem solve, be creative. And sometimes it elevates the story and it elevates the movie in ways that you would not have wanted to or thought of before.
But like something I legit, and I agree with you completely, but something that just occurred to me, and it was something we were discussing before we began recording, where we were talking about attention spans. And how like people are saying like these films are getting ridiculously long for absolutely no reason. And the thought occurred to me, I'm like, okay, if studios really want to keep audiences' attentions and meet the whole and deal with the whole attention span issue, invest in short films.
That's very true.
Invest in short films because like if you satisfy the whole idea of the attention span, but also like you have like the full complete story, because like it's ironic that studios don't even realize it, because like for Pixar in particular, remember their short films that they put at the beginning of every other feature film,
those are great.
They would be just as popular. Like a lot of them were like, I still think about the Lava short film, like La Love You and the Bao short film.
The Bao one, yeah.
Like, and I'm like, why don't we do that anymore? Like, let's go back to like the short film format for like animated films, and like, and like those films became their own thing, all on their own, apart from the feature films that they were attached to. I don't even remember what Bao. No, wait, I'm wrong. What was Bao attached to? Was it In and Out?
Inside Out.
It was Inside Out, right? And like for the La Love You, I think that was in front of Moana, but like those became their own. They had their own moment in the cultural zeitgeist, as you would say. But that's my any investors are watching, invest in short films and invest in short film filmmakers. That's it. I know we're gonna have to wrap this because we have class. But something else I really want to ask you, because you mentioned it just now, your brand. Like, what do you think is your brand as a filmmaker? Your identity is as a filmmaker. What do you want people to know about you as a filmmaker from your stories?
That's a great question, and like I've been kind of trying to like ask myself that same question too, in order to kind of make sure to like position myself as a filmmaker and my stories. And I took a workshop with like a mentor of mine. Her name is Kaya Alexander, and she runs like an entertainment business school. And that was one of the assignments we had, was like, what is your brand? Like
who are you?
Make it like simple, but also like enticing enough. And at the time I'd written this like statement, because I was also working on a romance film at the time, not drama. But at the time, like the brand statement was like a heartless romantic locked away in a cynic's safe.
Okay, what? A heartless romantic?
Oh, sorry. All right, a helpless.
Okay, I was like, how are you romantic and heartless at the same time?
Sorry. I think the spell check like adjusted the word. But anyways, I was writing that because like I think growing up, like I was like a hopeless romantic in certain aspects of like relationships, like love, and I love like rom-coms. But then you get into the more like artistic films like Christopher Nolan and Interstellar and Inception, Dark Knight, and as you grow and become more experienced in your life, you start to become a little cynical, and you get to see the other perspective. And I like to explore stories that kind of explore that gray ground of like morality and like truth. And so like my first one was about like a relationship and how like an idealized romance can fall apart like with reality. And then the second one is about my like family, and like how you think a family is perfect, but then you start to learn that there is some kind of disharmony and like cracks on the surface. So in that regard, like I just want to tell stories that are like natural, about human personal experiences. But at the same time, I feel like it kind of fits this indie drama genre. And where I want to go is I want to go and have more opportunities and position myself in a more commercial way, so that one day I have the power and leverage to make these films that I want to do. So like recently, I've been writing a TV pilot and working towards, I want to be a writer first and I want to work in a writer's room. And that meant what kind of TV show could I write? And the story I knew the best was my Korean soccer team at NYU. I've been on this team for 4 years and I've decided I love rom-coms and I decided to kind of try to create like a more modern way to approach this genre because it's kind of outdated. It's very it wasn't really diverse in casting at the time and it's unrealistic, like dating tropes and culture has changed. So now like what I'm making is this soccer pilot which glorifies sports, but it's also like making fun of like toxic masculinity and like just like a wholesome character who gets entangled in the wrong relationships. And I think like this has a more commercial appeal because it's Korean, it's young, it has sports for the guys and it has romance for the girls. And I think
Girls like sports too. Like I
and,
grew up watching football.
and I think
Benedict Beckham is one of my favorite films.
oh yeah, I recently watched that great film, and I think one I'm having a lot of fun writing it, but I think it's a more attractive pitch or proposition for a studio or production companies instead of like another family drama or another Korean romance film. It's just there's more upside and visibility and more exposure. I think just more areas that you could relate to as an audience and have fun instead of just going down this like dark like really serious story. I think this will be like a rom-com at times, but also like a dramedy. So I guess that's kind of like where I'm headed in my next direction.
So would this be a strictly Korean production?
No, this one would be almost all in English with like hints of Korean, because another thing is like I want to make a show that's for an American audience or a global audience, but in America, that's where I want to have my career in Hollywood. And this story is about like a Korean American boy who's trying to get involved in a Korean soccer team, and there's like a language barrier, so he only speaks English, but the rest of his teammates speak Korean. So it has a little bit of both, but definitely like the dating parts. He's seeing like girls in class, but he's also getting tangled with like the manager on the team who's Korean. So it'll have both English and Korean, which is ideally, I think what I'm good at and what I'm having fun with. And luckily, I feel like our culture is becoming more and more open-minded towards foreign films, foreign languages, and subtitles.
Okay, wait, so just one question. So if it's gonna be, it'll be like a Hollywood production made in America. Why would be everyone be, especially if it's like young footballers? Are they not Korean Americans? Are they like Korean immigrants?
So the main character, the protagonist, he's going to be Korean American who's grown up here, but then the team he's on is mostly composed of like Korean international students. And
so they're not fully.
Those are two kind of different cultures that I've experienced and I've gone to learn. And I think there can be like a point of conflict, but also different narratives and different cultures and storylines. Like Koreans dating and like Americans dating is also another like divide. So just a lot of like fresh material, I think, that can be fun to explore.
I'm intrigued by this. And one of the reasons I'm really intrigued by this, not just the sports elements, but something I really love to do is to watch Korean variety shows, especially the sports variety shows. And like in my head, I'm thinking like I'm already like kind of excited for this because like there aren't many sports centered dramas, whether American or Korean. Right. And like so for Korean, usually if it's sports centered, it's like really young ones. Like one came out 2 years ago. It's focused on badminton. Right. And there was one called Stove League, which was about a baseball team. So, but there aren't many sports center Korean dramas. So I'm just like intrigued.
Stove League was a great show that I really loved.
Stove League is so good, right?
It was like Moneyball, but like K-drama because it has to do with the front office. And I think my story has to do with more about the players and like the college experience students, young people. But it's I forget what you were mentioning just before, but I was gonna say that like my comp is like Ted Lasso, but a K-drama. So it's like it has that like sports, but like this wholesome humor. and the competitiveness, but also like the I don't know, like the juicy like drama that I think kids my age like to go for when they watch a show.
I'm intrigued. This is something I would honestly watch because it's like, like and I'm not just referencing Korean dramas, but in Korean culture, like they call them is it goose parents? Like where you send the kids overseas to study, and like your drama would be like the other side of that. We have the dramas with the parents
Oh,
working
yep.
for
Yep.
for the kids, but I'm like, you never really know what is going on with the kids in
Yeah,
this.
it's the kids' stories
This
now.
will be the other side of that where you get to see the
Yeah.
I guess into it to study it. And I'm intrigued. I would watch this honestly. I
Thank
would.
you. Thank you. I'm
I hope it
excited.
works out because I'm
I
like,
hope so too. I hope to like work on this, sell it, option it, be a writer and make this in the next, I don't know, 5 years or so.
yeah, this I'm excited. Like again, thank you so much for talking to me, friend. This was great. You know what we would probably have to like if I ever get to New York, or if you ever get to Toronto, we definitely have to hang out and chat.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. I'd love to.
Thank you so much, Fred. This was great.
Thank you, Carolyn. This was so much fun. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity just to talk to you and do a little interview. But yeah, thank you so much for like taking the time to really go through my work and just have amazing conversations. And I hope to just keep in touch with you and do more things together in the future.
For sure.
Okay.
All
Thank
right, so
you.